Welcome to this video on the Zenwara channel. This video is a follow-up to the previous video on this channel where I talked about the Mahavidyas and the different experiences of the Mahavidyas, the great wisdoms, the great experiences, right, that can be had, right? And as a practitioner of Zenwara, on your path of Zenwara, as you develop spiritually, you may gain the ability to visit stories in body, in person, right? And to plan your visits to stories in person. So, as you can worship the Mahavidyas for different reasons, right, you can also seek to experience them, right, have experiential knowledge of them, Darshan, right, and you can seek to have different levels of Darshan, including visiting their realm, visiting their domain, the domain of their story, where their story resides, and gaining the experience of that domain, right? So, as you experience visiting the Mahavidyas, I do encourage visiting as a group, right? And you'll understand what I mean, creating a party and visiting as a party, as there are, these stories can retain, right? Can seek to retain. And by being a party, by being a group of yogis together, you can help yourselves out in moments of difficulty to escape or get out of the story, right? But if you're an adventurer, a true adventurer of Zenwara, and you want to experience the Mahavidyas, you can experience their stories. And you can visit their lokas, if you want to see it that way, or their dwellings in this case specifically, to have that experience of them. Okay, the one we're going to talk about in the right now, okay, is Tripura Bhairavi. Okay, so Tripura Bhairavi is known, so essentially associated for different things, and I'm going to talk about the experience of that loka. So when you get the experience of the loka, entering the loka of Tripura Bhairavi, you might have noticed that some of our iconography on our murtis, you have severed heads, right? And that are put on the murti as well. So not necessarily even skulls, but really heads, heads in flesh, right? In some of the iconography at that point. So severed heads, not only just the skull itself. So as you have that, okay, that can give you an idea as to what kind of experience you'll have when you experience that loka. Okay, now you can look into what is known about Tripura Bhairavi. Okay, that there's a link with the aging process, right? There's a link with the decay of matter, right? And what you're actually seeing with Tripura Bhairavi is the functions, right? At that point, that basically govern the re-energization, if you want to see it that way, of matter. So basically the transformation of matter, right, and energy. So is what you find associated to Tripura Bhairavi. Okay, so as you know, if you transform, you take molecules, transform them, you're going to have the same matter. It's just a transformation of matter that you take place. So matter exists, and you basically manipulate matter and can transform it into different forms, if you want to see it that way. In that same way, what you see represented when you enter into the loka of Tripura Bhairavi, okay, when you experience that loka, when you learn to travel in the loka and body, okay, into that experience of Darshan, you actually experience, as all the Mahavidyas are very difficult and intense and fierce experiences of their lokas, this one is particularly fierce because you enter into the loka and then you basically end up in a room where you have a very scary being that's chopping body parts on a table, right? And so that's very scary. And then what you have behind of that loka is you have basically a conveyor belt that carries those body parts into where they go, right? Into the place where they're converted, right? That life is converted. So dead life is chopped up. Dead life is chopped up and converted into new life, right? So you see the transformation of matter. So it's a very traumatic experience because you walk in and you have this scene with the chopping and all that stuff, but you understand it for what it is, that basically the loka that represents those functions in that part of the story, which is the conversion of matter into other matter, right? So you have one of the essential parts of creation, right, of the story, which is the conversion of matter into matter, right? And what is that done through? The transfer of energy, right? So what you have here is you have all the processes that have to do with the transfer of energy, right, within the system. And we've talked about how in yoga you have the three processes of yoga, right, which is to receive, to hold, and to project the light of God, right? And the light of God is basically kept by systems, and they carry it into a certain level of purity as they can, depending on their capacity to receive and to hold it and to project it. That purity is maintained and also less maintained while it moves through the system, right? And as we seek to improve ourselves, we seek to maintain that purity of that knowledge and life all through the system, which is basically a better distribution of energy within the system by more efficient processes. So what you're seeing here in Tripura, Bhairavi is you're seeing the processes, right, represented of the conversion of energy. So what is conversion of energy? It's related to decay of energy, right? And you're seeing these processes, and this is the storyline, right? The story, the domain that governs those processes of conversion of energy within the system, within the story, within life, essentially, as we live it, right? So what you see is Tripura Bhairavi represents that conversion of life, right? That process of conversion of life, which is essentially that process of communication of information and the transfer of information, right, of life, that's held by containers in the system, right? Containers that contain information, right? And the containers in the sense is those bodies, right? Those bodies that contain that information, and basically chopping them up, right? Chopping up into a form where they will be converted, or dissolving them into a form where they will be converted down the conveyor belt into new life, new energy, which is the chain of life and the constant chopping up and dissolution of life, right? That dissolution process of creation, right? So you have that process of the dissolution of life, and you have that process at the end of that creation of life, right? And you have that whole together, right, which is the process of the preservation of life, right? The preservation, which is that moving of energy between the systems, right? And that conversion of energy from one system to the next, which is the transfer of energy within the system, which is the transfer of energy within the program and computer in which we exist. And as we can understand, within a computer, transfer of energy is very important, right? And as you can see, even when you look at your bodily functions, you know, you take in food, you hold food, and it comes out of you, right? And just think as simply as air. You know, you take in air, you hold air, and it comes out of you. If that doesn't happen for a period of time, you're not going to last very long, right? So you see, it's the fundamental process of life, right? And basically that conversion of energy that moves from one system to the next, right? And that dissolution, right? That dissolving of creation. So what you see essentially here is you see the different processes of creation, and you see the different phases of creation, right? The creation phase, the preservation phase, and the dissolution phase, right? And the communication of all those phases, right? Which are all taking place at that level of that loka, right? Of Tripura Bhairavi. Okay, so this is, yes, a loka that you can experience and you can travel to and have that experience, although it's a loka that you probably, as all Mahavidya lokas are, you know, you come in and you don't stay very long. You know, it can be experienced through the practice of Zenwara. And once again, if you do take on that practice of experiencing at further stages of practice, you know, and you learn to travel to stories in body, you know, prepare yourself well before entering the Mahavidya stories, right? With all your preparations that you can take, and go as a party so that you can assist yourself if you have difficulty in getting out of those stories. Okay? You don't want to get stuck in the stories, right? These are very old stories. So a little bit of information, right? So Tripura Bhairavi, and how basically what that represents, you know, is basically the phases of creation, you know, those three phases of the Trimurti as well, those phases of creation, basically, and it's manifested like that by the chopping and dissolution of creation, which basically leads to new creation, right, through the preservation of life. Okay, so thank you very much for listening to this video on the Zenwara channel, and have a great day.